Every Memorial Day of every year across the American landscape, ordinary Americans line the streets to salute the troops and memorialize the fallen. These are regular citizens who harbor a patriotic zeal, an abiding love of country. Yet, among members of this crowd are Americans who also harbor a disquieting ambivalence about America's appetite for war, an obsession with gallantry, explosives, death, and destruction. Proponents of American exceptionalism argue that America is unassailable and beyond reproach. For that reason, America can do as it pleases, anyhow, anywhere, anytime. These are also proponents of the American military-industrial complex. Who exactly are the beneficiaries of the American military craze? A coalition of groups with vested psychological, moral, and material interests in the propagation and deployment of high levels of arsenals. The tragic story of the Vietnam War. The wrong war, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. Mark Flanagan, a globetrotter of the U.S. Navy, is not a stranger to the Vietnam narrative. He served in Vietnam aboard the guided missile destroyer USS Richmond K. Turner in 1967.
Uncle Mark was in the U.S. Navy for a long, long time and was on a lot of different ships. Destroyers, originally called torpedo boat destroyers. They were eventually shortened to destroyers. They were very lethal weapons. And you know, they still are today. One of the few remaining lethal weapons in the U.S. Navy that Congress is funding. And Uncle Mark had some bone-chilling experiences in the Navy. Once, on a transit across the Indian Ocean, they almost capsized. We took a 57-degree roll. Do you know how steep this is, buckaroos? It's way up there. And we came back. Thank God. Thank God. And thank the Buddha and God and a lot of everybody else you could think of. Over. Uncle Mark is still here to do these types of videos, okay? I could have died. And then another time, when I was actually on station in Vietnam, we called it the gun zone. We got too close to this island, and they had us locked in on their fire control radar with their 8-inch guns. We were oiling. We were taking on fuel. We would have been history. And for some reason they didn't fire. I've never known why. I've never known why.
Effectively, U.S. involvement in Vietnam began in 1960 with American advisors who were sent to aid and instruct South Vietnamese troops. President Kennedy authorized and increased these advisors. However, shortly before his death in 1963, he viewed the future when he stated, "I fear that a war in Southeast Asia will be unwinnable." The catalyst for deeper U.S. involvement came in August 1964, when North Vietnamese torpedo boats shot at U.S. destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. This event never actually happened, but allowed Congress to pass the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which vastly increased the number of troops and material in Vietnam. By the end of 1967, there were 485,000 U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. U.S. troop losses and civilian casualty figures were triggering domestic protests, and the outcome of the war remained uncertain.
What we're looking at here is a CH-46 helicopter. It's a heavy lift helicopter. Uncle Mark used it when he was on a cargo ship after Vietnam in the late 1970s. We use these CH-46s to make underway replenishments with aircraft carriers. We would lift material and food and repair parts off the deck, generating a wind force of up to 100 miles an hour if you are unlucky as I was to stand below one of these things. And they were just magnificent workhorses. They've been phased out now, but they'll always have a warm spot in Uncle Mark's heart. Thank God they didn't blow me overboard one time. Thank God for that. CH-46, baby. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're here at Miramar Marine Corps Air Station in San Diego, California. We're at the Flying Leatherneck Aviation Museum, where we have many, many beautifully restored and some not so beautifully restored helicopters, fixed-wing planes, and helicopters. This little jewel here that I'm looking at here was a Huey, affectionately known as the Huey or the Bell helicopter, which made its debut in Vietnam in the early 1960s. It eventually became part of the Air Cavalry, the Air Cav as it was shortened. It took men and material in and out of hot LZ zones in Vietnam. As a matter of fact, one of Mark's closest friends from high school, who was wounded in the Army, his life was saved by one of these little Hueys, affectionately known by grunts as Slicks. They were also called Bell helicopters, Hueys, but most of the grunts knew them as Slicks, and they were slick. The Cobra, which was a variant of the Huey Bell helicopter, you could notice was Vietnam's and the world's first helicopter gunship. It was very, very narrow, as you could see, unlike the Huey, which was like a double-wide mobile home. This puppy was only a single-wide, and it was very, very lethal with a combination of cannons, missiles, machine guns, rockets, etc., etc., etc.
The Vietnam War, which began in 1960, was not over until 1975, when the United States pulled all troops and ships out and quit. Americans need to know that quitting the war was the same as losing it. In the end, the Vietnam War claimed 58,151 American lives and an estimated 1 to 3 million Vietnamese lives. What a disaster.
at the Miramar National Cemetery on a beautiful, lovely Veterans Day. No one's here, unusually enough, but we are. We're here to honor Americans' veterans today and every day. Honor all of Americans' veterans for what they've done in each and every war and their sacrifices. That's what we're here to do, is honor all of Americans' vet from yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We're here at the Miramar National Cemetery, Miramar, California. Today we're going to talk about a couple of similarities that Uncle Mark noted historically. One was with the Vietnam War, and one was with another conflict called the Iraq War. And as you're probably aware, or maybe not so aware, both of these wars, which cost us over 60,000 men, young American men, were both started on fabrications and fallacies, lies, better known as lies. The Vietnam War was started on the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, whereas several destroyers were attacked one evening. But the truth is, it never happened. Uncle Mark should know, he was over there. It just did not happen. Then fast forward another 20, 30 years, it makes no difference. But you have Iraq. You remember what we started Iraq for, don't you? They were called WMDs, folks. That would be weapons of mass destruction. Also, we thought they had ties to Al-Qaeda, the notorious Al-Qaeda. However, it turned out that they had neither weapons of mass destruction or ties to Al-Qaeda. So what are we left with, folks? We're left with two wars. Basically started on lies or fallacies. And all Uncle Mark would like to say, before we put over 60,000 young men into harm's way, maybe we should do so based on the truth, based on the honest-to-God, verifiable truth.
The proponents of American exceptionalism, who are also proponents of the American military-industrial complex, continue to argue for the elasticity of American military resolve. They ignore the human cost of the ravages of war, which explains the impulse for the American cycle of wars.
So Congress should be involved and make the decision each and every time that we go to war, unless it's a national disaster or emergency. Then maybe we wouldn't have these wars again. These two wars that cost us over 60,000 young men.